Hey everybody, this is Erica Sable. Welcome back to Sharp Objects. So today I was thinking of doing a little intro video to how I got into everything that I'll be talking about on this channel. That will include horror, sci-fi, experimental cinema, and tokusatsu. So yeah, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background. This is kind of like a vlog type thing, but I feel like it serves as a really nice intro to how exactly I got into this stuff. I know a lot of you have asked, you're like, oh, I didn't know you were into all this. I'm like, yep. Been into it for a long time. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a background, and then in addition, just to give you a bit better of an idea on what I like, I'll give you 3 of some of my favorites in each genre. They're not like my top 3 by any means, but they're, you know, they're supposed to serve as a way for you to get an idea like, oh, okay, so this is the kind of stuff you like, or at least like gives you an idea of some of the things I might enjoy. So I guess let's get started with horror. So horror. Horror is amazing. I used to get the worst nightmares as a kid. The worst nightmares. There were 2 things in particular that gave me nightmares as a kid. One of them was Child's Play, particularly the poster for Child's Play. That was very scary as a kid, and anything that has to do with dolls in horror films typically scares me, or anything humanoid really scares me. So I was really terrified of that. Just the poster itself, the idea of it, I think my mind was just racing, and I'm like, oh my god. My little, 6-year-old self, 7-year-old, probably, yeah, 6-year-old self was pretty freaking terrified. Another thing that terrified me growing up was, so there's a movie rental store that used to exist here in Canada, Jumbo Videos. I don't think that there's any more Jumbo Videos here, but there was one that I went to in Pickering, and it had this amazing horror section. It looked like a dungeon, and it had like these fake brick walls. It actually looks really bad, probably, if you were to see it now. But at the very end of this hallway, there was this glass case, and inside was Freddy Krueger, and it was like a wax sculpture of him. And I remember going to it every single time and scaring the bejesus out of myself, just looking at him, just thinking to myself, like as a 6-year-old, like, oh my god, like it's terrifying. It's terrifying. So at the same time, while I did get nightmares from a lot of these things, you know, I did cry a lot as a kid. I couldn't go to bed by myself. I was afraid of the dark. I was afraid of so many things around me. I was terrified. But I went back to it, and I kept going back, and I started realizing as I got older how much I love being scared. I love the feeling of being scared. I like that chilling feeling you get. So I started dabbling more into like older horror, like in like 80s horror, which is kind of cheeseball, but in a good way, right? So it's like one of those things where I got to see the funnier side of horror. Now that grew even further, because like around the 14-year-old age, that's when I really started dabbling in the scary stuff. But I felt like that went even further when I was, I believe, 18, 19, 20. Yeah. Especially when I was 18, 19, 20, I started dating different people who were very much into horror. Particularly one of my exes, he is rather, a special effects horror and sci-fi artist, and he was amazing. Like he's still amazing. He does some really great stuff, and he's friends with a lot of really awesome horror nuts over in Michigan, and I learned so much from him and from them. I remember going to one of our friends' houses, Rick's house, and this was like horror heaven. Like he had all the best B films, C films, Z films, whatever, and we used to watch them, like marathon them on his couch, just watching his projector. It was incredible. That's where I got a really good taste of not so much of necessarily the classics or of, you know, like the popular mainstream horror, but much more so the niche stuff, the stuff that you don't necessarily hear as much about. And also Netflix was a really big one. I started getting Netflix back when they were still releasing discs. So I think that was when I was around 18. So I would get 3 discs at a time, and then I'd have to mail them back. And I remember that's how I got into so many things, like Humanoids of the Deep and all these like weird silent films too and everything, and that's how I got into Inside, and oh, so many good films. So yeah, that was a really amazing time, and it's one of those things where horror is still a very big part of my life. I try my best to go to as many of those kinds of screenings as I can. I want to go to much more because I've been kind of neglecting that side of myself, and going to the Toronto After Dark Film Festival as well, which is one of my favorites. I love it very much. And yeah, it's awesome. I really, something about horror. Something about it, especially the niche titles, love it. Or like foreign titles too. Just European and Asian horror in particular is kind of, it's like my forte. It's what I prefer the most. Yeah. So just to give you a little bit of a taste of some of my favorites. I mean, I have a few here. I have this really pathetic looking Blockbuster case here for Audition, which was a really good horror film. I would consider it horror. I guess you could call it more a psychological thriller, but I consider it horror. This poor case. We should probably look at this. There we go. Next up, Fears of the Dark. This is so good. And lastly, we have The Host, which is kind of kaiju, kind of comedy, but it's horror in my eyes. So Sci-fi had a very similar sort of beginning. It was something that I was always really interested in, especially like sci-fi horror in general. Like, I think The Thing is what really got me. The Thing was like, whoa, this is really crazy, really vast. But I think the earliest one for me had to have been the Aliens series, or Alien series. That scared the hell out of me. Oh my gosh. But there was also a lot that weren't necessarily scary. Let's say like Gattaca, where it was much more of like a thinking person's sci-fi, right? So something about sci-fi, I don't know. Sci-fi in general has always intrigued me, especially the cyberpunk variety. I'm a big sci-fi reader, cyberpunk reader. I really like Philip K. Dick. I really like William Gibson. Richard K. Morgan had one really amazing book that I really enjoyed. I'm really curious to know if you even know. Maybe that'd be really cool if you do. And if you do, I'll give you a shout out. Why not? I'll give you a shout out if you can guess which book of his is one of my favorite books of all time. But anyways, yeah, sci-fi is one of those things that I've always really enjoyed. The idea of science fiction, the idea of technology advancing is something I really enjoy. I like seeing the downfall of it. I like seeing the growth of it. I like seeing the accomplishments we can get from it. So anything that explores the genre is something that's really important to me, and I got to explore more of that thanks to Netflix, and then, you know, thanks to one of my exes, because he did special effects for sci-fi and horror. So yeah, I mean, that had a very similar sort of history for me. It kind of gave me that sense of the unknown, yet it also gave me a sense of how I could live my life in the future, or rather the present at this point. And there's so many things you can do in life right now that it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of ridiculous, the kinds of things we're capable of doing and the ways we're capable of living thanks to technology. So some of my 3 favorite sci-fi films. Primer, if you're looking for good time travel, you got it right here. Next one, Tetsuo the Iron Man. You could technically call this horror sci-fi, or cyberpunk even. It's just, oof, so good. And then of course, we have some Blade Runner here. If you're looking for something more on the cyberpunk side of things, Philip K. Dick is just incredible, and he put together an incredible story here. Of course, we have the director's cut, the only one you should watch. Alright, experimental cinema. This one actually started when I was a bit older, just because of the content. Now, I started watching rated R films at a very young age. My parents used to just take me to the movie theater when I was a little kid, like 10 and up, and even earlier than that actually. And I'd be with them and I'd be watching all these rated R films, and I'd be seeing all these racy scenes. So in my mind, it was one of those things where I don't think it really fazed me very much. But a lot of these films in terms of experimental cinema tend to be a bit racier. They tend to be edgier. I think one of my best first forays into it had to be either Chungking Express, which is amazing. I think that Quentin Tarantino was talking about it in one of his commentaries, I believe for Kill Bill. I'm a big Tarantino fan, big Tarantino fan. If we want to consider his work experimental, I love that man to pieces. But yeah, there's that, and then I believe he also gave a shout out to Jean-Luc Godard, who is a really great 1960s new wave, like French new wave director that I really got into as well, including Almodovar as well in terms of Spanish experimental cinema. I grew to love each of them very much. There was something really special about all of the works they had to create, and I got to explore more of those when I got Netflix as I was older, and I really got to appreciate the artistry behind a lot of these works. So I'm just like, I think about it now, and that's actually what I have most of behind me here, is more experimental cinema. I love my genre stuff, but there's something about stuff that can't really be defined that I really enjoy a lot. So some of my 3 favorites are Amélie, must watch for any of you in terms of French cinema. We also have Body Double here, which I freaking love. This is a great look at voyeurism right here. This is a really great film that I'm definitely gonna have to review sometime soon. And then lastly, I have Mulholland Drive, of course, because I love David Lynch too much sometimes. I love him very much, and I love this film. This is one of my favorites. Last but certainly not least, we've got Tokusatsu. That one actually started really early for me, but without me even knowing what Tokusatsu was, or me even being able to like define it. There was no way for me to define it. I didn't even know what kaiju was. I had no idea. I was just like, oh, like big monsters or Power Rangers or all these things. So this started about as early as horror did for me. Horror, sci-fi a little bit later, but yeah. So my first foray was Power Rangers, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So unfortunately, it was the Americanized Zoo Rangers, which is kind of a shame. Kind of a big shame, but at the same time, you know, as a kid living in North America, it was actually a pretty nice gateway into Super Sentai. I can't really complain, to be honest, and man, I had such a crush on the Green Ranger. Such a crush on him. It was ridiculous. It's funny, I'm just gonna tell a little side story here, but in my mind, I did this all the time for almost every series I watched as a kid, whether it was Pokemon, Power Rangers, Digimon. I would create my own character. I never like envisioned myself as being a particular character. I was always a different character, and I would have my own side story, and I would always end up getting together with the one guy I liked in the show. Always. This always happened. So I imagined I would become the Silver Power Ranger, and then I would get together with the Green Ranger. I don't know what I was thinking, but yeah. So yeah, so a lot of that was like my first foray into Super Sentai, and then my next my foray into kaiju was actually thanks to television itself. I think it was like weekend television, like in the afternoon after all the cartoons are over and everything. I remember seeing Mothra vs. Godzilla, and that was my first foray, and then I watched the original Godzilla, and then I kind of went on from there. But there was something so epic, so incredibly epic about Mothra vs. Godzilla, just because they're both monsters that were kind of in the gray area. They're not really good or bad, but it was just so epic. If you're looking for really good versus kaiju, I just felt, like so good. So good, I'm like moving my set around and everything. Anyways, yeah, so that was a very good first foray into that, I gotta say. And then unfortunately, I was unlucky enough to go see Godzilla, what is it, 2000 in theaters. Oh, I didn't even know what I was getting into. I was a kid, I don't even know how old I was. I was probably like 8 or 9 or something. I don't even know, like I can't even count. I'm 26. I don't know, whatever. I was young, but that was a really bad movie to see in theaters, so don't ever see that in theaters if you ever get the chance, unless you want something really cheesy, which isn't necessarily bad. It was good cheesy, kind of. Another thing that really got me more into Super Sentai, and this was totally by accident, but so I was in Target, and I was looking for DVDs, and I typically bought a lot of DVDs growing up, or my mom did. Yeah, I was like, oh, I want this, or I like that, and sometimes she would get it for me. And one of the shows that I found that I decided I really needed in my life was the complete Ultraman here. I don't know why, but I felt like I really needed it in my life. And so it's the complete series. It's all 39 episodes, and I was like kind of crazy. I was just like, whoa, this is like Power Rangers all over again, right? But even better, like just different, so different, right? And so it was kind of one of those things where I really got to appreciate it, and I really, I don't know, it was kind of a funny thing to have happened. So then there was a huge gap. I didn't really watch so much in terms of Tokusatsu, but then I started getting back into it, and then I started dabbling into it some more, and I was watching some Kamen Rider O's, and yeah, I mean, like lately I've been watching Gokaiger, and it's just been really great and kind of reminiscing over all the old Godzillas I watched, and I've been marathoning more of them. Still though, Mothra versus Godzilla is still like, it's like up here. It's up here. But yeah, so I had a really interesting history with Tokusatsu, and I'm really interested in exploring more of it. It's what I know least about compared to everything else I've mentioned, but it's something that I'm just like so ecstatic to learn more about and be open-minded about. So in terms of 3 of some of my favorites, which isn't a very big library, but it's, you know, it's something. That would be Ultraman. I gotta say, like, as a really good first foray into proper Tokusatsu, I gotta say it's still, I have this spot for it, right? Next would be obviously Mothra versus Godzilla, and then the last would be Kamen Rider O's. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a taste of my background in horror, sci-fi, experimental cinema, and Tokusatsu. It's been a wild ride. I gotta say, it's been really fun, and I'm a big film nut, and I'm just big into subculture in general. I've always been. So I'm always interested in finding out more and just learning and rewatching old favorites and things like that. So I'm really excited to, you know, really like officially be launching this channel and to have a little bit more something different compared to gaming and anime. So I really do hope you enjoy. Please let me know what some of your favorites are in one of the genres, or you know, a few of the genres, or whatever. You know, if you want to share some memories with me, leave them in the comments below. And I will see you all again this Thursday for a spiffy little review. So I actually already said what the review is going to be on my weekly vlog on my other channel, so you can check there, but I'm not going to spoil it here because I really don't want to. So do please stay tuned for that, and I'll see y'all later, okay? Alright, peace.